Thank you. Again, my name is Jennifer Homendy, and I'm a board member with the National Transportation Safety Board. With me today is member Tom Chapman and Bill English, who is our investigator in charge. We call the investigator in charge the IIC. The NTSB is an independent federal agency charged by Congress with investigating every civil aviation accident in the United States and significant accidents in other modes of transportation. We're here to conduct a safety investigation, and our mission is not to just determine what happened, but why it happened and how it happened to prevent this accident, a similar accident, from ever happening again. Before I go any further, I want to once again extend our deepest sympathies to those who lost loved ones in this tragic event. I can't imagine what the families and friends of those who perished in this accident are going through, but know that our hearts go out to you, and you will be on our minds over the next days and months and years ahead. This morning we began with an organizational meeting where we established parties to the investigation. Parties to the investigation are entities that can provide technical expertise that will help us in gathering factual information to help us conduct the investigation. The parties to the investigation are the Federal Aviation Administration, Sikorsky, Pratt & Whitney Canada, Island Express, and the National Air Traffic Controllers Association. We also established investigative groups. We take our investigators and the parties to the investigations to the investigation, and we establish smaller groups to drill down to get the factual information that we need. The investigative groups we formed are operations and human performance. They will look at the pilot, the organizational structure, the company, how the company is regulated. Air traffic control, which will look at the history of the flight. Airworthiness, which will look at the airframe, instruments, wreckage, seat configuration, and flight controls. Power plants, which will look at the engines. There were 2 Pratt & Whitney Canada PT6 turboshaft engines, and the power plants groups will focus on that. We also have a weather investigator. And speaking of weather, we have a request for the public. We're looking for photos of the weather in the area of the crash. If you have photos that can help us, again, in the area of the crash, if you could send those photos to witness@ntsb.gov. That's witness@ntsb.gov. We're not just focusing on weather here, though. We take a broad look at everything around an investigation, around an accident. We look at man, machine, and the environment, and weather is just a small portion of that. So we would appreciate the public's assistance. If you have that, please send that in, again, to witness@ntsb.gov. We also went on scene today. Our investigators began documenting the scene, collecting evidence, taking pictures, and we had drones in the air to begin mapping the wreckage. There have been a lot of questions about the FBI and why the FBI is here. The NTSB has a memorandum of understanding with the FBI to help us collect evidence. They are essentially a force multiplier for the NTSB. There is no criminal portion of this investigation. So with that, I really want to thank the FBI Evidence Response Team for their assistance with our investigation. I also want to take a moment to thank the Los Angeles County Fire Department, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office, the Los Angeles Police Department, a variety of search and rescue groups, many of which I saw hard at work today on scene, and the Los Virgenes Water District. Again, this is our first full day. We're continuing to gather information. I do have some factual information on the flight path. With that, I want to read it because I want to make sure it is reported accurately. And so if you'll bear with me as I read it, its initial information shows that the helicopter was flying under visual flight rules, or VFR, from John Wayne Airport to just southeast of Burbank Airport. Around Burbank, the pilot requested to transit controlled airspace under special visual flight rules. Special VFR is an air traffic control authorization that allows an aircraft to proceed through controlled airspace at less than the basic VFR minimums of 1,000-foot ceiling and 3 miles visibility. ATC advised the pilot there was a delay due to traffic. While awaiting approval, the helicopter circled for 12 minutes until the special VFR was approved by air traffic control. The helicopter transited the Burbank and Van Nuys airspace at 1,400 feet and proceeded south, then west. The pilot requested flight following to continue to Camarillo, but Southern California TRACON advised the pilot that they were too low for flight following. Approximately 4 minutes later, the pilot advised they were climbing to avoid a cloud layer. When ATC asked what the pilot planned to do, there was no reply. Radar data indicates the helicopter climbed to 2,300 feet and then began a left descending turn. Last radar contact was around 9:45 a.m. and is consistent with the accident location. I anticipate we'll have more factual information to share tomorrow. I believe we will have a press briefing at some point tomorrow. Please monitor our Twitter feed at NTSB_newsroom, where we'll put out the time of the press conference. I do anticipate we will be here about 5 days on scene to collect perishable evidence. We're going to continue to document the scene. We are not here to determine the cause of the accident. We will not determine that on scene. On scene, we are here to get the perishable evidence. So with that, I will take some questions, and again, monitor our Twitter feed for tomorrow at NTSB_newsroom. We still need to verify that. The question was the helicopter going too fast? That's still something we have to analyze as part of our investigation. The question is, what is flight following? And I do think that is important. Flight following is radar assistance for the flight and helps the pilot avoid traffic. It's communication between, in this situation, air traffic control and the pilot. It is when air traffic control said they were too low, it wasn't that they were too low, it was too low to provide flight following assistance. It can be, yep.
Any other pilots in the area have similar issues with this weather? Any other ones who
The question is, did anyone else report similar issues in this weather? That is part of our interview process, and they'll be looking into that.
Jennifer told me the witness who was near the crash site who said the fog was as thick as milk. Should that pilot have been flying around this area with the fog that bad?
The question is, should the pilot have been flying in the fog at that time. I mean, that's part of our investigation. We look at weather, and we'll have to determine that at some point. Steve, hold on.
Can I ask you, have you been to the wreckage scene? Have some of the members been to the wreckage scene? Can you give us some description of what you've been able to observe either being there or from other observations that you've had?
The question is to describe the wreckage scene and whether I had been to the to the scene. I did go to the scene for several hours this morning and departed around 12:30. The scene itself, and you asked for a description on the scene. There is a impact area on one of the hills, and a piece of the tail is down the hill on the left side of the hill. The fuselage is over on the other side of that hill, and then the main rotor is about 100 yards beyond that. It looks about, the debris field is about 500 to 600 feet. So.
And what is the debris? What does the debris field tell you about the force of the impact, if anything, at this point?
The question is, what does the debris field tell us about the force of the impact? I mean, we're continuing to look at that. Our investigators are still on scene. Again, it's just the first day, but that will help us. You had a question about the black box? The question did we recover a black box? There wasn't a black box. And there isn't requirement to have a black box on this, so there was no CVR, no FDR. There was an iPad where for flight, which is essentially a flight plan, weather briefings, and the pilot uses that in flight. We'll be looking at other avionics on the aircraft to see what information we can gather, and then we're going to be looking for other electronics. Question is, was there any chance for survival? That's part of the investigation. I mean, it was a pretty devastating accident scene.
Ms. Homage, given they circled for 12 minutes before being allowed to go southwest of Camarillo, is that a normal time to wait and cover for 12 minutes?
The question is whether it's a normal time to wait 12 minutes for permission to proceed. And there are times where flights are held out. That'll be part of the investigation as we look into this. Go ahead.
Thank you. Given the fact that the coroner's team is still working on the site, how does this affect the initial stages of your on-site investigation?
The question is, given the coroner is still on site, how does this impact our investigation? It doesn't. We are working alongside. They are doing what they need to do for recovery, and we are doing our part of the investigation for collecting evidence and drone mapping. So they're doing their part, we're doing ours, and we're all on scene.
Covering wreckage.
Correct.
Are you concerned about people trying to take souvenirs, and how are you guarding this?
Question is, how is the area being guarded? That is something that the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department can answer. That is something they have under control. I'm sorry. Is the weather investigator NTSB? The weather investigator is, we have a meteorologist on staff. That's correct. What's that? Is there another route? We'll look at that as part of our ATC review. The altitude is 1,075. What's that? 1,080. 1,085.
The impact
impact crater is 1,085 feet above sea level.
Okay. The impact crater is 1,085 feet above sea level. Question is whether was all the wreckage found in the same location. It was, the debris field was around, 500, 600 feet. It's what's no.
Yeah, the debris field's about 500 or 600 feet. We found
Yeah.
all the four corners of the aircraft. It's all accounted for in the debris field.
Yeah.
Were you able to tell if the helicopter landed right side up based off your initial look at the scene?
Did the helicopter land right side up is the question. The debris field is pretty extensive. And so, as I said, there was one initial impact. Part of the debris was down the hill. Another part of the debris was over the hill. And then the main rotor was about 100 feet beyond that. Last question. Last one.
With the wreckage and with the fire that happened afterwards, how confident are you you'll actually find the cause?
The question is, how confident are we that we'll find a definitive cause? We do this all the time. The wreckage is just a part of an investigation. There's a lot of information that we request as part of an investigation. That's pilot records, company records, information on weather, ATC communications. So the wreckage itself is only a piece of that. So I'm very confident we'll determine the cause of the accident. Thank you.